Okay, so we saw in the last demo just how to quickly do a UV map, talked about resolutions and the results of just a quick UV mapping when you have a texture already laid out. Um, but this brings us to a few things before we get into the different tools that we can use, and that's the different types of UV maps. So, or textures, I should say. So the two types of textures you can use can be broken into, or the types of textures you can use can be broken into unique and tileable. This is a unique texture. And what that means is that this is a texture that would only really work for this particular model. Putting this on a chair, putting this, I suppose it could be a bedspread if you want to give your kid, nightmares and spend a lot on therapy bills. But ideally, this basically would be just for this one cereal box, demented as it is, and this is a unique texture, unique to this model. A tiling texture is the other one, and a tiling texture is what you would use for, say, something like this. And if we look at this here, so a tiling texture is essentially a texture that repeats. I have a leather texture and I have a fabric texture that I can tile, and I have to adjust it, but this is just an example of applying it. Typically, tiling textures show a different type of surface. That could be grass, dirt, in this case leather, fabric, anything like that. But what makes it tileable is that it should be seamless, and that means when it repeats, you don't see the lines of when it repeats. And number two, it should not have any unique characteristics. In other words, this leather works really great for this model here. But because it's repeating itself, it's tiling, if I had a scratch in it, then every time this texture would repeat, the scratch would repeat over, and it just keep going. And that would look weird. So if you're using a tiling texture, they're great for materials like this. They're great for walls, floors, carpets, certain things where they can repeat infinitely, or they have a pattern, but it's a specified produced pattern. In other words, marble tile that has shapes in it that are supposed to repeat. So things like that. But when you get into, oh, there's a dirt stain or water stain, and then every time the texture repeats, that's a bad thing. That doesn't work right. There are ways around it, but we won't be talking about that right now. So this one would look like it's a unique texture, but it's not. It's actually multiple materials assigned to different faces. So it's one material attached on certain faces, that's the leather, and a second material attached to everything else, that's the fabric. And what we have to do is take this little fella, or a reasonable facsimile of it, and UV map it so that the textures will tile properly. Because if I try to apply a tiling texture to some of these, in some ways it'll work and in some ways it won't. It depends on what the default material was. Whoops. So if I were to assign that leather material to this, we could see it's doing all sorts of weird stretching, and that's because it's not UV mapped. Okay, and that's what we want to avoid. We want it that it makes that nice pattern that repeats and looks a lot more realistic. This needs to be tiled more, but we'll get into that. I just basically quickly UV mapped it as an example. Okay, so that, when it's not tiling properly, it actually looks more like wood than leather. And we would expect the same sort of things going wrong with this chair, the pads, and pillows of this chair. So, excuse me, let's talk about some UV mapping techniques. that if you have something a little more organic like this, of how to do it. So that's the intro to us UV mapping and texturing this guy with tiling textures.